physical exercise is one of the most effective natural ways. Obviously, eating is another one, but
Yes.
physical exercise is one of the most effective natural ways to reduce the not so great parts of ADHD.
Yeah.
So when we take away recess, that does not help at all. That creates more behavior issues. And honestly, the first thing I think of when I have a classroom going awry, right? If it's one or two students, it may be something going on with them. If it's a whole classroom, that's on me. Obviously, I need to change something. We need a timeout, a positive timeout. I may just say, hey, wait, everybody, what's going on here? Talk to me. And often, sometimes with students who have ADHD, if they are struggling to get something done, I'll ask them, what could I do to help you get this done? And also set the framework. Why is this important to get done in the first place?
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Now it's time to welcome April Tierney to the Soaring Child. Hi, April. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I am so glad you're here, and I am excited to actually get to talk to you. What you do is amazing, and the way that you talk to our kiddos that have ADHD is something that every single parent should witness. Our paths crossed when I found out about you on outschool.com that are teaching students how they can embrace their superpowers and how they can do better at school. And I just had to have you come and help us build out our course where we've got for kiddos, teaching them about the nutrition side of things. But what you're doing for us is teaching them about their superpowers. And so
Yes.
It is amazing, and what you've done and you've helped us has turned out so well. And so I just had to get you on to today's podcast. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yes, thanks. Glad to be of any help.
Great. Now, I really want to understand, you were a teacher for so many years, 18, I think it was.
Yes.
Why did you decide to jump ship of, being in person and start working at outschool.com and creating courses for kids that have ADHD?
Yeah, well, there are quite a few reasons, but, during that time in history, the pandemic is starting. I was already working online in some other capacities, and I kind of realized not only did I want to spend some more time home, but that on OutSchool, I could really laser in and focus on exactly what I wanted to teach, who I wanted to teach. And in my professional career, I learned slowly through all my years of experience that I tend to work exceptionally well with students who have ADHD or who are neurodivergent, in some way, shape, or form. And so I thought, one thing I've learned through all these years is that these students need more confidence being thrown their way, because I think sometimes our world doesn't appreciate all the gifts that they have. We only talk about the more negative parts sometimes of ADHD or other neurodivergencies. So I thought this is something that's needed. Am I the number one expert on ADHD? No, but I am an ADHD enthusiast who has worked for years, effectively with kids who have ADHD or who are different. And so I thought this needs to happen. And plus, then I get to hang out with kids who have ADHD, a whole classroom of them, which is fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing. And thank you so much for the work that you do and having that passion as well. You are so right to say that a lot of kids with ADHD, they get so many negative messages sent their way. I think it's something like 20,000 more negative mentions, negative messages a year. Sorry, completely lost that one. More than their peers. And so it's so important that us as parents and teachers and anyone working with them really help boost them up and build that confidence. So I just love what you do. Can you just tell the listeners, for those that don't know about about OutSchool. This is obviously not a podcast about OutSchool, but I just want you to share what actually is OutSchool.
Yeah, so OutSchool is kind of like an online marketplace for teachers. So the teachers create and list courses that they want to teach, and these can be on a variety of subjects, almost anything that you can think of. There are courses on math and history and science, but also art, Dungeons and Dragons, mindfulness, animals. And so a lot of teachers are flocking there because they know this is a place they can express their creativity. They can teach what they're really passionate about. And so that to me was like a perfect platform to kind of begin doing what I really was passionate about.
Great. And what's the name of your specific course?
I have quite a few courses, several on ADHD, but the most popular one, the one I talk most about, is called it's I have to stop this. I just thought of 3 courses at once. It's called ADHD Superpowers, the hidden advantages of ADHD.
Oh, amazing. And that's definitely what we're going to dive in today. And so let's start on that topic.
Yeah.
ADHD superpowers. What are some of them? And, what are those really positive traits of kids with ADHD that sometimes people just miss?
Yeah, so I talk about 8 different, quote unquote superpowers in my class. There are probably many more, but we've only got so long attention spans, right?
Yes.
ADHD, right? So we talk about energy being one, physical, mental, verbal energy. There's lots of different kinds of energy sometimes we see with ADHD. We talk about creativity. So many students with ADHD have a lot of different ideas, creative avenues. We have artists, we have musicians, we have gamers. We talk about being funny. I absolutely think that is an advantage that some people have in life, that charisma, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about being adventurous, in a lot of the adult world, sometimes we see this form as more adventurous career choices, people being entrepreneurs. In fact, people with ADHD are 3 times more likely to start their own business. So being adventurous.
That's amazing.
Yeah, another one of those quote unquote superpowers. Multitasking, being really empathetic. Some people with ADHD experience big emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which can be really hard, but I think can make them understand more how other people feel as well. And so we can see these people in these helping professions. And my favorite is hyperfocus, I have to say, if I'm a little biased, which is just that ability to focus for a really long time on something that you love. And one reason I love talking about it, I think, is because it tends to go against what people think ADHD is.
Yes.
So many people think, well, if you have ADHD, you just spend the whole day like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. And that's not the case. It can be if students are doing things they're not passionate about. But what we're finding is a lot of people with ADHD are able to hyper focus on things they love, which can make them amazing at those things, right? So, so many different things, but those are just a few of the superpowers we talk about.
That's amazing. And so how would parents start to help their children really understand their superpowers and use them for good? It's kind of like the superhero.
Yes.
How do they use those powers for good rather than bad?
I think even that language is a good place to start, right? So if we have lots of energy, there's ways to use that for good, for sports, for creativity. There's also ways to use it for not so great, like annoying brothers and sisters, right?
Yes.
So you can use that language. Are you using those superpowers for good right now or not so much, right? But obviously too, I'm sure a lot of parents already do this, but paying special attention to things your child is interested in, introducing them to new things they may latch on to. Sometimes people with ADHD, kids with ADHD, like to try new things. And so life is kind of a buffet of different choices. And I think sometimes people with ADHD, kids with ADHD, like to stay a long time at the buffet, right? Try lots of different things. And in our society, sometimes we might see someone like this as a quitter because they try something and they hyper focus on it for like a week or two, and then they're on to something else. And I think we look upon that as a not so great thing. But as parents, I would love to see them encourage all these different things because at some point some of these things are going to stick, right? And that might turn into something really amazing as a career, or it's just a really special interest of them that brings them joy as they get older. So I would definitely start there with things they love and integrating things they really like to do into tasks in everyday life and also, schoolwork and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that idea of a buffet of all these new things to try. And,
Yeah.
honestly, I've never looked at it that way where, they try all these things, but nothing sticks, but that's okay.
Right.
That's okay at the end of the
Right.
day, as long as they continue to try new things and eventually something will stick. Now, a lot of listeners out there that are listening to the podcast, are always asking, how can we make the classroom environment a more ADHD friendly place? Can you share some of those strategies with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the main things that I try to work into classes I have now or that I have taught in the past in public school is building as much choice as I can into different activities. I think a lot of times in a general, quote unquote, regular school setting, this is what we're doing today, and there is no choice. But I think choice boards are something that is coming into more popularity, where there's many ways to show what a student knows about a subject. Could be they're writing a paper, could be they're making a brochure, it could be they're shooting a video, maybe they're making a game out of what they learned. So letting students choose how they're displaying what they learned, I think, is really powerful, because so much of interest in ADHD is driven by like the motivation that they have when they really are enjoying what they're doing, when they get to choose, right? So I would say that is one thing that teachers and parents could do, is give a lot of choice in what the kids are doing.
I think that should be for every kid.
Yes.
To be able to, everyone learns differently. Some are visual learners, some learn by touch, by doing.
Yes.
And so to give them the ability to decide how they show what they learn it's revolutionary. I think that needs to be shouted from the rooftops, and the education system needs to change. April, you are on to something there for sure.
And you hit the nail on the head, because when we implement strategies that help students that have ADHD, that implements strategies that helps all students. And that's what we're learning is even if a student doesn't have ADHD, they have learning preferences and differences, and who doesn't like to be interested in the project that they're doing? So every time we adjust to help all students, we help all students. And so that's just one way that we can improve that. There's others as well, but that is one of my favorites.
Okay, well, we've got plenty of time today, April, so let us know. Let us tell you.
Let's keep going. Movement, obviously, a lot of students with ADHD need to move. In my classroom, my students could be found sitting almost anywhere when they were doing their work. Some were under their desks, some were in a beanbag, some were on top of the desk. And you know what? If they were doing the work and that made them feel better about doing whatever they were needing to get done, so be it, right? Why do you have to sit in this chair in this specific way? Why can't you sit on something else, as long as it's not harming anyone? So not only for independent work, but building movement into class activities too. For example, in math class, I made a small adjustment. Instead of doing problems on paper and pencil, we have whiteboards, and kids, it's just more fun to write on a whiteboard with a whiteboard marker. And guess what? I can see what they're doing better without having to have big chunky glasses necessarily from across the room. And so then when we're ready, we hold the whiteboards up, right? And we're getting movement that way. Or I might ask students, which of these answers do you think is correct? Is it A, B, C, D? And they can hold, for example, I would say 1, 2, 3, and they would kind of do this rock, paper, scissors movement, 1, 2, and then hold up, a 1 for A, a 2 for B. And so somehow just working movement into the everyday classroom life with something as mundane as answering questions. Maybe they stand up when they answer a question. Maybe they do a certain movement for a different answer, but bringing movement into the classroom in any way that you can, again, benefits all students, not just students with ADHD.
Yeah, look, they are some really creative ways to bring in movement. And I think
Yeah.
that parents listening could do that at home as well.
Yes.
And, I get a lot of questions of parents that are struggling with homework. And so all of
Mhm.
these strategies that are shared today can be used in all scenarios. Keep them coming, April. Keep
Yeah.
them coming. What's next? What's
Yeah.
next?
Well, I would say one other thing that I've noticed about students and people who have ADHD is something that's new and novel tends to catch their attention more, make something that's not their favorite more bearable. So it depends on your child. For some students with ADHD, they've got to have a set schedule. For others with ADHD, that makes them really bored. So sometimes, even in my class, I would say, hey, you know what? We're going to do this other subject first today. And just that small switch was like, ooh, this is new and exciting. And maybe I would do that when I knew that that lesson wasn't super exciting that day because we had to do something for state testing or what have you. But that's a change. Sometimes novelty is enough to, make something a little more exciting. And then also, just new ways of teaching, new materials. Students also hopefully can be involved, especially if there's homeschooling happening, right? In picking out the kinds of materials that they are using and mixing up what kind of media it is too, right? It's not always a book. Sometimes you're learning through a video. Sometimes it's audio. Sometimes we're creating something. Sometimes we're acting something out. Even something as silly as new pencils, like anything new and novel. For some students, again, everyone with ADHD is different. Some have to have a pretty strict routine, but others, that is just not exciting enough to capture interest. So even something as new as a new snack, a new pencil, something that's different in the classroom, I think can help students to pay attention better.
Fantastic. You are a wealth of knowledge, April.
Oh, thanks. I try.
Yeah, no, I think that this is your superpower and it's amazing. I know I've got a lot of parents probably listening out there thinking, well, my teacher that teaches my children, they don't come up with these ideas.
Yeah.
How can parents sort of broach that conversation with the teacher directly, without sort of not hurting their feelings, but without encroaching on that line between parent and teacher?
Yeah, I think good advice on that is it kind of goes both ways as far as sometimes I might have suggestions for parents, but I didn't want to step on their toes, right? And if I had something difficult to tell parents, I think one thing that's really important to focus on is we are all working together for this child, right? And when you're all on that same page, it's hard to argue, right? It's hard to be unwilling to change or try new things. So if you have a new teacher and you're not quite sure how they approach neurodivergent students, you can maybe just present them, hey, we're so excited, so-and-so is going to be in your class. We have a lot of ideas to make it easier for you to connect with our child, things that have worked in the past, because we really want this to be a great year for both of you, right? For the whole class. So I think coming from that place of we're doing what we can to help our student, to also help you as a teacher, to help them, I think is kind of the first place to start. And then just not maybe bombarding them with, here's a stack of books to read over the summer, but little tips like this that have helped and worked. And for some students, depending on their school experience and what's happened in the past, there may already be accommodations written into an IEP or a 504. These are terms we use in the US, and I'm not sure if are used all over the world. But, some of those things might be written in anyway. So it's a good time to broach that at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And so, we've talked about how to make sort of that ADHD friendly classroom. You've given some strategies.
Yeah.
I know you teach online, and so I'd be interested to hear, are there certain teaching strategies that work really well for ADHD kids over a computer versus those teacher strategies that may work better in the classroom?
Yeah. And so there's a couple, I think it is more challenging online because you can't really have the physical proximity, right? That sometimes you can
Mhm.
have as a teacher. You're very far away. In fact, a lot of the time, halfway across the world, perhaps.
Yes.
But I do like to build in breaks in my lessons for little, I call them like pop quizzes, which is just, we've already learned this, but which answer do you think it is? I turn the annotation on. They can circle the answer. They can blurt it out. They can put it in the chat. So I try to make little breaks every now and again. I'll also put like funny memes that might have to do with what I'm talking about, interesting videos. So I kind of pepper in a lot of, I guess, spices, right? You've got your main meal. You're trying to make it more interesting by kind of peppering in these different things, these audio visual things that are getting students either moving or doing something or answering a question. Because if it's just that presentation, it's not going to probably be enough to capture interest. And I too am generally a pretty outgoing, gregarious like person. So I try to capture interest by showing my genuine interest in what I'm teaching, which I will say on OutSchool happens quite often because it's rare a teacher design a course they don't want to teach, right?
Yes.
And so when you're online, it's like, this is my jam. I love what I'm talking about. And it's really interesting to me. So I think that comes through naturally and on a platform like OutSchool. And so I think a lot of it is just and I don't want to try to give myself a put up, so to speak, but part of it is just me being interested and looking interested and genuinely being passionate about what I'm teaching. So
Well, I definitely can tell you that you're not putting yourself up there because, you are coming across today just with that passion, and I can see it, and I can see how most children would actually be interested in what they were learning from you. So I think
thanks so much.
definitely you've got that demeanor for sure. Now, are there any other sort of teacher strategies or methods that may benefit students with ADHD in the classroom?
Yeah, I think the last one's probably fairly obvious, but just trying to connect whatever it is that is supposed to be taught to whatever interest that student already has, because we know so much about the ADHD brain regarding dopamine and motivation, where there's a connection there, and I'm not a scientist, so I'm not saying this very eloquently, but without motivation it's really difficult for a student who has ADHD to concentrate. So connecting whatever it is they're learning to something they already love or something new they might love is really important. So especially if you're homeschooling and you've got the opportunity. For example, you have a student who loves baseball. Great. There's a lot of math lessons that go along with that. Think of all the stats, right? And I know a lot of parents have already tried this, but it's always worth another mention. If you can get your children involved in the subject you're teaching with something they already love, that's going to go a really long way.
Yeah, for sure. Now, this is a bit of a question left field.
Yeah.
When you were in the classroom in person teaching children,
Yeah.
and they weren't listening to what you were doing, and you gave them every opportunity to do what what you had asked of them, and you gave them more than ample tries to give them the opportunity to do what you needed to get done. There is obviously a lot of different approaches when it comes to that situation. I hear time and time and time again that a lot of schools actually take away recess from these children. Firstly, I'd love to know your thoughts on that particular repercussion, but also I would love to know your thoughts on what you feel is, a natural consequence that comes when a student doesn't listen or doesn't follow through with what they're meant to.
Yeah. Oh, I do have thoughts on taking away recess, and that should never be done ever for any students, but especially students who have ADHD because they need to move. And I was just reading something the other day that physical exercise is one of the most effective natural ways. Obviously, eating is another one, but physical exercise is one of the most effective natural ways to reduce the not so great parts of ADHD. So when we take away recess, that does not help at all. That creates more behavior issues. And honestly, the first thing I think of when I have a classroom going awry, right? If it's one or two students, it may be something going on with them. If it's a whole classroom, that's on me. Obviously, I need to change something. We need a timeout, a positive timeout. I may just say, hey, wait, everybody, what's going on here? Talk to me. And often, sometimes with students who have ADHD, if they are struggling to get something done, I'll ask them, what could I do to help you get this done? And also set the framework. Why is this important to get done in the first place? If someone, especially with ADHD, is working on something they feel is pointless, that's going to be really hard for them to pay attention to, unless, again, it's something they love. So I think setting up, why is this important? Having them tell you why it's important. And if it's not important, then obviously reassessing, why did I assign this assignment, right? Why is this important? So reassessing that as a teacher, but asking the students too, why is this something that is important for us to get done? How can I help you get it done? And if there still is a lot of resistance, hilariously, what do you think the consequence should be of not getting this done? And again, these things may not always work, but we're bringing in the student voice, the student choice. But I would say the last thing I would do would take away something they really, really enjoy. Because again, that's such a motivator. And I would rather use that as motivation than take something away. If they love something, instead of taking it away, maybe they can do it longer if they get that thing that, they want done. I think there's a lot more to be said for using more positive motivation than taking something away.
Positive reinforcement all the way. And I love that problem solving, working out why this is happening rather than just punishing for what's happening. There's obviously a reason surrounding, and we talk about that a lot with parenting, ADHD as well. We really need to be curious actually what's underlying that tantrum or that way that they're talking or they're not following through with what they're meant to be doing. So I, definitely align with that approach. Now, you did mention exercise, and you're obviously talking to someone who very much talks about nutrition and natural approaches, but do you have any other advice to, decrease the symptoms of ADHD naturally?
Oh, goodness. Well, exercise, like I said, is one of the best ones. Let me think. And of course, the eating, those are I think the most important.
Totally.
Let's see, what would be the next best one? I guess when we talk about symptoms, so often that has a negative connotation, right? Which yes, but when I think of symptoms, it's something that's happening because of ADHD, right? So I maybe would focus on the more positive symptoms that are happening at that time. If there are negative symptoms, I think that's something to talk with the student, work through it, and see if they can bring the positives in to help with that. So if they're really energetic, but they're not really good at keeping track of things, is there a way you can use their energy to to help with that? Another thing too that I guess I don't know if it's necessarily decreasing all the symptoms, but I do love habit stacking as a way to help students remember things. And if anybody hasn't heard of that, basically take something that you will not forget to do, or that your child will not forget to do. I always give my students the example of me in the morning always forgetting to take certain vitamins, right? For a long time, I kept forgetting that. And I thought, how can I remember this? Well, if I put it next to something I won't forget, for me, that's coffee. Every morning, the coffee is going to go on. I'm not going to forget that. So I thought, duh, April, put the vitamins next to the coffee. You're stacking one new habit you're trying to form onto a habit that you already have. So I guess when I was reading an article about this, scientists said you can stack up to 3 new habits onto an old habit that you already have. And so you can kind of just keep stacking those things on. So if there's something your student is not going to forget to do, maybe it's playing on a tablet, right? You somehow put the other things they need to do next to that. If they're having issues forgetting things, not getting things done, which can happen. Again, this is only some of the symptoms of ADHD. ADHD. Habit stacking can sometimes help with that.
I love habit stacking. I think that is a very, very good piece of advice to give parents, especially tying it with the, them wanting to play media, because I know a lot of kids out there are addicted to that for sure. But also, April, one of the ways that they can, turn those symptoms around is embracing them as superpowers, and exactly what you teach and preach. April, this was wonderful. I loved talking with you today, and I really just want to thank you for everything that you do for kids with ADHD. You are there teaching them. You are there, boosting them up, which is what they need. We need more of you in this world.
Likewise, we're all on a team here.
Yes, we are.
And same thing. Yeah,
totally. And I just want to, say thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience with all our listeners today. Can you tell our listeners where they can actually find you online and where they might be able to find these courses that you do for kids?
Yeah, if you go to outschool.com, there is a search bar. And if you type in my name, April Tierney, which you can see the spelling on, there's nothing too crazy as far as the spelling goes, probably in the show notes, you can see a wide variety of classes that I teach. And I can also provide you with a link as well, Dana, to my teacher profile on OutSchool. It's kind of long and complicated, so I don't want to read it off here. But that's the best way to get in contact. You can message me. Parents are free to message me about any classes or just browse the many different classes that I teach on there. Yeah.
Fantastic. I will definitely drop that link in the show notes. Thank you once again for joining me today. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.